All right,
All right.
we have begun.
Hello, my name is Alexander, and I'm a reporter for Cy-Fair ISD Student News. We are honored to interview, and I want to inform you that this interview is part of a series of interviews for all candidates. We are a nonpartisan organization that cannot endorse dedicated to keep. We endorse dedication into keeping the students of Cy-Fair ISD informed, and this interview helps us fulfill this mission. We want to let you know that this meeting will be recorded and potentially uploaded to social media additionally. To the end, at the interview, we will ask a set of extra questions that our district affairs committee would like to know. With that out of the way, let's begin the interview. All right. So my name is Alexander, and I just want to get to know you. Who are you? Like, how would you describe yourself?
So, my name is Kendra Camarena. I'm a mother, a wife, and a public servant. I think if I was going to explain myself, it would be with those three words. I have a service heart, so I always find myself leaning into community service or just kind of service to the community. Through my work, I was in education for up to 20 years. From there, I did everything from, teaching to instructional coach to finding or supporting like the students with their clubs. I did the World Affairs Council, speech and debate. When someone they needed a soccer coach, even though I never played soccer, I stepped up to be the soccer coach. So I just always consistently find myself getting involved in supporting the community. I've been on many different boards in my lifetime and currently sit on the Harris County Opportunity Fund Board. So I think public service is who I am, and then also an advocate for public education. So if I was going to define myself, um, that would be how I would define myself. And let me go back, and I'm a mom of two wonderful young adults. So that's awesome.
Did you teach for Cypher ISD, right?
No, I taught for Houston Independent School District.
All right. Just clarifying. Also, where are you from?
I'm from the Houston area, so
Yep.
I'm born and raised in Houston,
Mhm.
right kind of on the border of Cy-Fair, HISD, Klein, and Aldine. So growing up, when I was in high school, I actually lifeguarded in Harvest Bend as well as Carriage Lane, all within the Cy-Fair ISD school district. And interesting fact, my husband and I bought our first house in Cy-Fair ISD.
Cypher ISD. Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Okay. So when did you start working for the district?
Well, I started working for the Houston Independent School District. I started working as soon as I graduated the University of Texas at Austin. It's kind of an interesting story. I went to Scarborough High School, and when I graduated, I had 3 degrees and was somewhat in the conundrum of what do I want to do with my life, as I think sometimes college grads are. And my dad had told me, "Well, baby, you're really good with kids or like teaching. Like this is something you do. Maybe you should try it." So I went to the high school that I graduated from and got a long-term teaching or substitute teaching position there, and then went back to school at the University of Houston to get my teaching degree.
All right, that sounds amazing. What position are you running for, actually?
So I'm running for the Cy-Fair ISD School Board Trustee, position 7.
Position 7. All right. And is there anything more you'd like to tell us?
I have a master's degree in social studies education. I think that's, and so with the University of Houston, and I think that's it. I
That's
think
it.
that's the main pieces to who I am.
Yeah, the main pieces to your like personality and it's
Mhm.
all.
Yes.
That's amazing. What caused you to run for the board though? Like,
So we moved. So like I told you, like we bought our first house, and then when my grandpa passed away, he gave us the house, and
mhm.
so um, when my we moved into my old like my childhood home, And when we did that, we were there. It was great. But my husband was ready to move again, and he wanted my daughter to be able to go to a better school district. And so that's one of the things we found. Cy-Fair ISD has always been known to have some of the best schools in the region, if not the best schools in the region. So we moved from the Houston Independent School District to over here so that my daughter could go to, she's currently at Cypress Ranch High School. And when we moved, and I don't know if you all, are familiar, but, there's a lot of things going on in the
Yeah.
Houston Independent School District.
Oh, yeah.
As an advocate, my last teaching space was at Wheatley High School. And so I was always advocating for the students and the school. I'm just trying to kind of showcase and share like the great work that was going on there since it was being considered as the school for the takeover. So I was always actively engaged, even with the board over there. So when I came over, right, natural tendency, you're watching. I'm already watching board, the school board. So I start watching the school board here, and as I'm starting to watch, I kind of am like, wait a minute, like we were leaving, like we were moving and leaving to go, to kind of get away from this, shall I say? But then in addition to that, kind of listening to the community's concerns, listening to the people's concerns around me, with the vote to remove bus transportation for anyone over 2 miles. Like I still can remember that moment where I'm like searching on my phone to see if my daughter, if we're going to be within that, are we going to lose our bus transportation? We were literally 2.03 miles, which is the only reason why my daughter was able to keep her bus transportation. So I guess, getting actively engaged, supporting on my side. So, I mean, I was advocating very strongly for sidewalks in our community, specifically in areas where I could have the greatest impact, and just really trying to keep our up to date, like the things that were going on in this region. Uh, when I was asked to like fill out a questionnaire, I said yes. So I think that's kind of how I got here. So between, watching board meetings, you know, being actively engaged in the way that I best could be actively engaged, and then being asked, Kendra, would you consider, filling out this questionnaire? And I said yes. And that's how I'm here. I filled out a questionnaire. I answered the call someone asked. And so this is, I guess, one thing I would always say to everyone as we're here. Like, if someone asks, if you can say yes, because we always need people to step up to the plate
Mhm.
to do this work.
That's true. That is true. Uh, what? So, when you worked for Cypher ISD, did you want to make an impact on it? Like, did you join because you wanted to make an impact?
When you say, did you join because you wanted to make an impact? Like, we moved here, and when we moved here, as anyone, right? Like, I
Yeah.
lived here, I left for a little bit, I'm now back. Um, so I kind of was just watching and listening and learning. And I can't help but want to advocate for what's right, or at least, and I can't help but want to support the community. Like I told you, I'm a public servant at heart. So I would say yes. I've always wanted to find. I can't not find myself helping. Even if I try, I still end up in a position where I'm working for the greater good of our community.
All right. Also, there's another question. A policy that affects you personally, but you said how the bus driving affects you. I mean, the bus length affects you personally, right?
Hmm.
Is that like all of it, or is that all the impacts that Cypher ISD has done to you personally, or has,
Um, so that you mean the impacts of the school board and their decision making
yeah,
and
like
what it has done?
policies? How
Yeah.
has
So they're, I guess, like not impacting me personally, right? But impacting my family, impacting the students around. I think there's a couple of others. One of the ones that I hear, especially as we're doing meet and greets on the campaign trail, talking to people, the reduction of library access has been one that people point out consistently. I know that for my daughter, that is, because of the fact that we've had to reduce our number of librarians, they're having to split campuses. That reduces access to the libraries for the students. And I think it's not something that impacts me, but I think about like when I was a mom and my daughter was young and in elementary, and how like, and I don't know if y'all had these experiences too, but you'd go to the library, you'd be so excited, and you'd bring home all these books, right? Because these are the books that you were going to read for the week, and you were so excited. And from what the community is sharing and the information I'm getting back is that that's not happening everywhere. Our elementary students don't have that access. And so for me, that is a concern, right? Like, how do we find a way? I know we have parent volunteers that are working really hard, but how do we find a way for all of our elementary schools and middle schools and high schools to have that opportunity for the students to access the libraries? Another one I think is kind of more related to curriculum and how, like, the removal of chapters. Like, that is something is when I looked at and read, for example, because again, remember, I'm an education. I have a master's in education, social studies education. So for me, when I went to go read the textbook where they were removing the chapter related to the content, I was really it. I was confused. I didn't understand the why. Why are we removing when the information was relevant? I know that people, the same kind of goes for the science. And when they removed those, I think it's 13 chapters that were removed. And, there's a reason why that content is placed in there, right? These are textbooks that go across the nation typically. And so I'm concerned when we pull out information that is information that is being taught everywhere. And then when that a student, and I know this, right? I taught high school. When you go to the college level and you're missing some of those elements, then we're actually, in my mind's eye, hindering our students because we're not giving them access to that information. And I know that we're teaching the TEKS, but again, you have to remember, like, at the same time, like, the TEKS are set out as it from a teacher's perspective, right? Like, I'll use an example of government. When you're teaching the major Supreme Court cases, right? They list out a few Supreme Court cases, but it doesn't mean that you're limited to all of those Supreme Court cases, right? There may be more that you want to include. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is we need to be able to teach those standards to the depth and complexity that that um, that is possible, so that students are able to, like, have that one understanding, and but then also be able to apply that later on when they're moved beyond their high school years, and going into college. So
All right. And how does your campaign slate work?
and the slate that we're on,
Yeah. How does it
so it works where there is a group of 5 different or organizations that came together to create a coalition.
work? Hmm.
And when I said the questionnaire earlier, this is the questionnaire I filled out. They asked individuals to fill out a questionnaire, and then between those 5 organizations, they determined which candidates they thought would be best fit for their slate. And so there's 3 of us that are on that because there's 3 positions available, and I am the one who is running in the position 7 on that slate.
All right. And what are the candidates that you're running with? Like, what are the other candidates that you're running with? Like,
So we've got Leslie Gilmart, who's running
hmm
in position 5. She's a Cy-Fair, former Cy-Fair ISD teacher,
hmm
an instructional coach in the area, and is still works in the world of education and coaching teachers and training teachers. And then you have Dr. Cleveland Lane, who's a professor at Prairie View A&M, in the science field. Again, educator. And what one of the things that I think really, for us at least, is we're all parents first. We're taxpayers, and then we're also former educators, so we understand how board decisions impact at multiple levels.
all right, all right. And If you do get bored, what are some changes that you will make or reverse?
So I guess, one of the first things that I would like to see is more transparency. So right now, one of the things that, as a public education advocate, right, or any type of advocate, one of the things you do is you look at the board agenda, and then you want to look at the supporting documentation so you have an understanding of whatever, that submittal is or transmittal, the presentation, kind of have an idea, like do your homework, right? I'm gonna look at it as like doing our homework. And so one of the things that I found that I struggle with when I was, looking up, okay, here's the agenda for Cy-Fair ISD school board, but what policies are we changing? And so I think one of the first things that I would advocate for is that transparency, where we're putting those policy changes and those attachments online. So, news organizations like yourself and, parents like myself or taxpayers like myself too can then, look and see what that policy is and see if they're, I mean, hey, great, it's perfect. We love it. Then we can speak on behalf of it. If there's areas where we feel like there needs to be change, then we can advocate for those changes. So I think one of the first areas for me that I think is a pretty easy one is to bring that transparency so that everyone in the Cy-Fair ISD community, from students to parents to taxpayers, and educators and staff, have the ability to kind of have an understanding of what the board is considering.
All right, thank you so much for your opinion. And how will you work with legislators to impact CFISD or make those changes to CFISD?
That is a phenomenal question. Thank you for asking that. And I think it's a really important one, right? When we think about like state funding and school funding and how it's being allocated, I think it's really important to build that collaborative effort and work to ensuring that our district as a whole is getting what it needs. So, what do I mean by that? Like, regardless of our partisan opinions, right? We are all Cy-Fair ISD. We need to be coming together and advocating. And I say that as, in the sense of we, as all of us, need to be having those conversations with our state reps. We need to be having those conversations with our senators, and we need to be having our conversations with, our governor and lieutenant governor. I'm sure y'all are familiar. Have y'all followed the LOHI? We do a homestead exemption, a local homestead exemption, and there is a rule where there's a percentage of reimbursement for that, but that has not been done. And to me, because the TA commissioner has, if I'm not mistaken, the TA commissioner, that is within his purview. I look at it as all of us in Cy-Fair ISD need to be going to the governor and lieutenant governor and saying, hey, we need you to tell, your commissioner, to please release those funds. Or as we've heard in previous board meetings, continue to push our local legislators to write bills and try to pass those bills that will allow that funding to come, that reimbursement to come back towards us. So that's just one example, but I think we have to continually, and one of your roles as a trustee is to advocate for what the district needs, what your schools need, and what your families need. And so there should be a very strong relationship between a board member and all of their state level, as well as any other local level elected government offices. Because I'll give you an example. When it came to the work, and I can speak to it directly, when we had our bus transportation cut, it was our local county commissioners that stepped in to put in the lights, to put in the school zones, to put in the sidewalks. And so, if you don't have that relationship, right, then you're not capable of getting the things done to meet the needs of the community.
All right, that's my first part, and I finished asking the general questions, and the Cardinal will now be asking the candidate specific questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sebastian. You did a pretty good job.
You did a great job.
But let's get straight back to the point. So these questions will take 15-30 minutes, and then there's extra questions up to 5 minutes. There's only going to be 2 questions for candidate specifics. So let's get started. Based on our reporter's findings, you are an economic development manager. How will that help you fulfill the duties of being a school board member?
That's a great question, and thank you for asking. I think that being an economic development manager and working with workforce development and kind of having that understanding of where, not only where we are as a community, right, when it comes to, the businesses that are coming in, it also helps me kind of understand what those workforce needs are going to be. And so coming from that type of background, I can, you know, share, and be able to provide thought and looking at, our programming and what we're doing, and even, providing some insight potentially of what are some of those upcoming workforce needs. It also helps me understand and be able to kind of be on the forefront of what's coming in. So part of economic development is, in the world of economic development, there's this recruitment aspect, right? Recruiting businesses. And so when you work with your local economic development councils in the region, they're constantly recruiting new businesses as well as the county is. And so being able to have that kind of insight, I think, could also be very good from a perspective for someone that's sitting on a board to be able to have that information and knowledge. So both on the, what's coming to our community, and then also what are the current and upcoming workforce needs, and having an idea of training. And then I think there's also an aspect of like partnership opportunities, being able to support and making that connection that may not have already been, or that partnership, because of the work that I'm currently doing.
Thank you very much for your response. We every person has a unique insight and perspective, and we hope that yours is able to do one to give them, more insight on which direction our district could potentially go to. That moves us to our next and last question for section 2. I'll go in section 3. Based on our reporter's findings, you have previously ran for House District 148 in 2019. What have you learned since then? And why did you switch to run for school board in 2025?
So, two great questions. So, I love government. And what do I mean by that? I believe in government, and believe that when government works for the people, government is at its best. And so I decided to run because there was an opportunity. And one of the things that I learned, I think, was there's so many different perspectives and ideas. And so being able to like reach out and hear people and listen to people and understand and hear those stories really becomes even more of a motivating tool. And then also when you run for political office, because you're running with other people, right? Because you're not elected, you really have the opportunity to build relationships, not only with the other candidates that you're running with, but also with people from across the district and even the region, I would say, because you're not necessarily always just meeting people within that area. For Cy-Fair ISD School Board, I really wasn't anticipating this. It was not on my radar as something. As I shared, we had just recently moved back. I was really more listening, paying attention, and doing the little things that I could do to support and advocate for our community. So it wasn't something that I foresaw myself doing until someone said, "Can you fill out this questionnaire?" And that's kind of where we got. I'm glad I got called. I got the call, shall we say, to put my foot in and to be able to like listen to the people and hear like from students, from teachers, from paraprofessionals, from our custodians, from our parents, and even our taxpayers, like to really listen to what their biggest concerns are and the changes that they want to see, and know that I could, if elected, potentially have the opportunity to make those changes for them.
Thank you very much for that. I mean, definitely, we hope your perspective and your endeavors are wholehearted, and wherever you go, regardless if you get elected or not, makes the best impact on the children. I mean, at the end of the day, it's the children, the students that matter. But that wraps up our section 2. Let's move on to our extra questions. All right. First extra question. With the 25-26 school year starting, what's your message to the students of CFISD?
Simple. Do your best, right? Do your best. Know that you have an entire community rooting behind you, here to support you, and continue to do your best, because when you do your best, that is when you are successful. And in the end, that success isn't going to just lead you to graduation, but to beyond, to a career that you hopefully that you love.
Very straightforward and on to the point. We really appreciate that. That brings us to the little trivial question. What is your favorite elementary, middle, and high school in Cy-Fair ISD?
That is a trivial one. Let's see. Well, because now you're going to see, I can't, this is a trivial one. So here's what I'm going to say. I love them all. Because there's this part of me that wants to be like, well, my neighbor's a rental, and right. And then I want to say Truett Middle School, because I used to chaperone their 8th grade dance for my nephews, right? And that was such a great memory. But then I get caught up. Do I want to say Cy Falls because of my nephews in Langham Creek, or do I want to go Cy Ranch? Because my daughter would probably say I better go Cy Ranch, which, by the way, they're doing Mary Poppins this school year. So make sure I'm putting a plug in to go see Mary Poppins. They will be flying. So that my daughter's in tech theater. So I really struggle with that one, but I think it was a really great question. And I will say, um, I- every experience that I've had at any of the schools, from when I did Bus Buddies earlier this year, to supporting and sharing information to the community with the different schools of what's going on, every school has just had this energy where you just know that kids are learning, they're having fun, and they're loving what they're doing. And so for me, that's a hard question, which is why you saw I could not really answer it very well. But I will say every school I've ever experienced has always had a phenomenal energy, and you can see the work that's being done. So, what I would say is thank all the teachers, administrators, staff for the work they do, so that they can provide y'all, right, with the best education possible. And then thank students as well for putting in their due diligence in their work, so that they can find the careers of their dreams and love what they do and be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's important to, pursue our happiness, our
Mhm.
dreams, and all that. Now, personally, I say this to most of the candidates. It appears you answered incorrectly. If you can't tell, I go Cypress Woods High School, so that's the correct answer.
Uh-oh.
Um,
Oh, wait, I
um,
forgot Cy Woods and Cy Ridge. There you go. Oh, wait, and Cy Springs. I better say Cy Springs too.
Thank you. But let's get a little back more to the more serious ones.
Mhm.
Next question, second to last. We're almost there. As you are campaigning, how are you able to connect with the voters, and what have you heard from them?
So far, we've done a number of meet and greets. We actually have one tomorrow morning where individuals are opening their houses to us and bringing their neighbors and friends to have really great dialogues about kind of where the concerns are, and what they want to see for the future. One of the things that I love about our community and I love about Cy-Fair ISD is the history. I'm, again, a social studies history teacher, so I really appreciate it. And a lot of times, I don't know if people realize how many families have been historically, like, and I say historically, teachers in this community, right? Moms, daughters, granddaughters, all teaching in this community, or all a part of the Cy-Fair ISD staff. So that to me was something I thought, a little tidbit I would want to share that I love about Cy-Fair ISD. But going back, so meet and greets, listening to them, letting them ask us questions. We've done at least 6, 7, and we have more planned. We've also been knocking doors. So we've already been block walking to, and reaching out, sharing, our messaging to people and asking them, like I always say, like, you have the candidate here, right? What questions do you have for me? Because I want to make sure that people have the opportunity to ask those questions to me. And I've heard everything from, no tax increases to libraries and schools. They want school board members who oppose vouchers, school public or private school vouchers. I've heard from teachers related to some of their concerns with how the upcoming new curriculum as well as the chapter removal. And I'm sure I could continue to go on and on because there's been so many more librarians. Library services was a really big one, that for some of our elementary school parents and teachers. And yeah, I think the other one is ensuring that we're funding bus transportation in the future. So just because we were able to fund it currently, right, doesn't mean that there may not be a point in time where we may, there may be have to be looked at again. And so I think that is one that I've heard as well, is that ensuring that those core services are being funded, knowing that we're going to be or currently in a budget deficit.
Thank you for your clarification. I love how you give a perspective. You kind of educate us, the audience, a little bit to, how the campaign trail, grassroots, and all that, and, see them here with other people. I mean, maybe I might add to the list, maybe put microwaves in the cafeteria, just a little
Okay.
thing just to say.
Yeah, what else
But,
coming?
but yeah, thank you for the perspective and the variety of issues you pulled up. On to the last and most important question. How can students be more involved in decision making at the district level? And what role do student voices play in decision making?
Well, I think student voices play a really key and pivotal role. And I think the way that you have that opportunity to do that is by keeping up to date. And so I know, for example, many times when I've gone to the board meetings, there's been a student there or a few students there who are following. I think they're great examples. They're following, they're listening. You don't have to go, you can watch, right? You can watch online if you want to on the YouTube channel. But I think it's really having an understanding of what's going on, not only at your school level, but at the board level. And then finding those areas that you either want to say, great job, or we need to be thinking about this and why. And so finding what you want to advocate for, because I say both, right? Because we want to let people know, whether it be the school or the board, they're doing a great job. But we also want to let them know when there are, they need to be thinking about other items. And so one of the things that I'm glad you brought this up, because this is really important to me. One of the roles of a board member is to advocate and listen and ask those right questions. And so if y'all are coming to the table and saying, Miss Camarena, like, we really need to be thinking about like how this decision is going to be impacting A, B, and C. And let me, and here's my why, right? Here's my evidence to support it. Then that is your way of coming to me and then allowing me to do my job, which is to advocate and ask the right questions. So it has come to my attention that there may be a problem if we move this way, because this could cause harm and whatever that may be. How can we reduce that harm? And sometimes it's asking those right questions, those some people say difficult questions, right? But thought-provoking questions. And so when you advocate from your perspective, then it allows those who are in that position to advocate at a different level can ask those right questions, so that we can ensure that there's the least amount of harm and the most amount of benefit for everyone.
Thank you very much for your response. Going back to the school board meetings, you might have seen me at the school board meetings. I'm pretty sure you probably recognize me. I have my little corner. I sit up there. But maybe one day me and maybe Sebastian, if he wants to go, we could maybe shake hands with each other and get to know each other at these meetings. But yeah, I mean, that brings us to another thing. So if another interesting thing that all seniors should probably know is, if you are 17 years and 10 months old, you're eligible to pre-register to vote on the election in November 4th. And I personally consider this, for the seniors, our last gift to CFISD, because we want to make sure we leave a good legacy behind. And I really hope that whoever is a part of our senior class, I'm a senior, getting a little too old for this, but hopefully I can, me and my class are able to cast a vote to make an impact for the district. But yeah, that's most of our questions. I'll cut the recording and then ask you a couple of the follow-up questions.
Okay.
So I'll cut the recording in 5, 4, 3,
Thank
2,
you.
1.